Don't do that yet.
Oh, we're on.
Okay.
When you say don't do that, it was too late. Sorry. Yeah, I was just listening to Liberty Rules Radio. Those guys over at Blog Talk. Very interesting. Paulo had a birthday, so happy birthday to him. I'm sure he's not listening. I think his show's still ongoing. So that was way cool, meeting those guys and stuff. Anyway, that's a good show, Liberty Rules Radio. That'll be in Brad's news segment anyway, but if anybody is listening and has interest in the topic generally and you want to be entertained, that's a good place to go. So, all right, with that, Brad, are you ready for me to actually start the show?
You can. I'm trying to get my docket. There it is. Okay, great.
Oh.
Yeah, hit it, Tom.
Hit it. Oh, geez. Now you put the pressure on me. Here we go. Maybe we don't. I'm giving it a... My iTunes thing is stalled at the moment. That's how you do that when you hit that, and it just then you get the ball turning, you know. That's what I got right now. Hey, it might take 10 minutes before this is start.
And now for something completely different.
There we go.
Humans do have an amazing capacity for believing what they choose.
I think before we go around killing people, we had better make sure of our evidence.
They lied to you. It's time to learn the truth.
You can't handle the truth!
From what was once an inarticulate mass of lifeless tissues, may I now present a cultured, sophisticated man about town.
One of these days I'll get that fixed so you can actually hear that, Brad. I think that would make it a little handier.
Oh, it's okay, Tom. We can handle this.
You've been doing it so long without hearing the intro, you're probably getting good at it, right? Oh, anyway. Okay, welcome everybody to the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. I'm trying to get up here on the docket so I can actually know what I'm talking about. Be handy for me.
I'm doing the same thing.
Oh.
My computer keeps flipping screens, but here we are. And yes, welcome to the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. This is Brad, and I am joined by my very good friend Tom. And just as a tease, we may be joined by the great Trigger a little bit later on. Yep. Tonight's episode is entitled Free Markets, a Conversation. And so we really appreciate you joining us. I hope it's an interesting topic. This is something that I wanted Tom to talk about. And I'm going to chime in a few things of my own. And so we hope that we have a great show in store for you. Mm-hmm. Along with the free market, some other discussions we're going to have tonight include the recent Republican entry, yet another, Tom.
16.
Another Republican entry into the the King's race.
Yep.
And that would be our own home state, if you will, Governor Scott Walker.
Yep.
Which, we're not going to talk about that right yet.
Yeah.
Reaction to the Iran nuke deal that was announced this morning. A brief update on the continuing bailout for Greece. And Obama's...
Commutation.
I was going to get that. Of sentences... that I think was that announced today or yesterday? I think it broke today.
I think it was actually yesterday is when I saw it first.
Okay,
recent, very recent anyway.
And then of course our free market discussion. So we hope that you'll stay with us. Remember, the chat room is open if you are listening to us live.
Yes, that would be cool. And I'm actually getting in there chat just to say hello. No one there yet. Anyway, I guess this is the part where I was supposed to do my. This is actually kind of interesting, at least for me, and I think it's actually kind of hard for people to understand, and I don't know, maybe a little hard to take as well. So I just want to, the big picture on the show, I guess, is where I do my little shtick here at the beginning of the show every time. But the political philosophy of freedom is really the broad picture. And this is the thing that most people have a really hard time dealing with. It's not built upon opinion. So I'm attempting not to. Of course, I have bias. I like to say I'm biased towards freedom. But obviously, I can't make a perfect argument, but I'm attempting to. And that's where, obviously we ask for your help whenever if you're listening to the show and you have comments or you think we've been inconsistent, we really would like people to help point those out and build a discussion around that. But so we're not building this discussion on opinion. We're not building it on empirical evidence, on data that surveys have created and built, right? And it's even not, and this is a really hard one, built upon facts. And I know that really, so what? How could that be? And I would argue that this is built upon a much more solid foundation than any of those things, right? And I know you're still scratching your head because, you got to be kidding. You're not built on facts. But the political philosophy of freedom is built upon logical deductions from what we call axiomatic statements. That is, the case for liberty is properly built from statements that are irrefutable. And I know people say, well, I could refute them because I could shoot this down, but hang with me so you can understand what I'm saying. And this is, in part, and I'm going to diverge here just for a second, is why people do not commonly understand the positions taken many times on the topics of the day by libertarians, or I call myself just a freedom supporter. Try to stay away a little bit from that rhetoric, right? And it takes time, I think, as we can all attest to grasp the context of the argument, and that's the logic upon which the case is built. Usually, people say, I don't know, are you for or against? Are you pro-choice or not? Are you for gay marriage or not? Are you, for legalizing drugs or not? And I agree with you 17 out of 20 times, so I say, hey, I generally agree with you. That's not what we're attempting to do here, because our positions are built from statements that, again, I would argue are irrefutable. And let me dive into that just a little deeper so you understand what I'm talking about. Because, again, when people say, if I think something's irrefutable, the next guy might think, well, I can refute that. Just hang on. Give me a chance and I'll argue with you. And we're still open to that. I'm not arguing that. But let me explain where I'm coming from here. One of the statements upon which the case for freedom can be built is that each of us is a self-owner. That is, each man is a sole and proper owner of himself. Hopefully you get that right. Now, one cannot logically exercise your objection. You can't logically exercise your objection to that statement without proving that it's valid. And again, I'm sure detractors are saying, well, I could do it. Well, think about it for a second. To express that you are not a self-owner is essentially to prove that you are. That is, if you say you are not a self-owner, you necessarily exercise the right of self-ownership in doing so. So in the event you are not a self-owner, how did you gain the permission, using air quotes, to express that you're not? And if you required such permission, from whom did you get it? Right? So that's a tough thing for people to begin to understand. And again, I'm building the case from statements like this, right? And another one just off the top of my head is, we can argue. I mean, how are you going to deny that? What are you going to say? We can't argue? That's a performative contradiction, right? Because you're arguing by saying you can't argue. That's what I mean by an axiomatic statement. But think about it even deeper. To deny self-ownership is to support, well, I don't know if deeper, I'd say maybe in another way, is at least, if you don't support self-ownership, right, that means someone else or something else has to own me. If I don't own myself, somebody, something, some organization, some other guy owns me, which is now at least a two-class system, right? There has to be some owners and there's some owned. So in a legal framework, you're supporting a minimum of a two-class system, because you could have, a subset of people are also owners. But even think about that. If the others, say there's another guy who owns me, first of all, I think we used to call that slavery, and people kind of rejected it. And I would argue that the reason to reject it is because it, again, denies self-ownership. That's really the the crux of the argument. Not that most people just don't like it or think it's wrong. Anyway, right? If someone else were in fact to own me, they must own themselves in order to do so. So how come? So there is self-ownership, but it's not universal. That's what the argument would have to be. And again, that wouldn't make sense, right? How can one guy own another guy? So some people are just born to be self-owners. You believe that, or you support that some people are just kings, kind of as Brad referenced to earlier, and they're entitled to own other people. Again, I think that kind of thinking has been rejected on a number of bases before. So anyway, we'll look at self-ownership in a much deeper way in upcoming episodes. But I wanted to just mention this because I think these are the underpinnings for a discussion on free markets, and I'll make that connection a little later when we get to that part. But I just wanted that foundational work to be laid, and I know that's a lot in just a couple minutes. But I just want people to be aware of that's where this, in large part, comes from. So it's like, well, you just happen to support free markets. Big deal. What about the next guy who doesn't? So, you're on even footing. You just have a disagreement there. That's my point. It's not just a disagreement in opinion or in facts or anything. It's a disagreement in logic, and that's a disagreement in logic, I guess, is poor wording, because it's either you're using logic or you're not. You don't necessarily agree that you are or aren't. So anyway, listen to our following discussion. Question us in the event you understand that we have not been consistent in promoting justice and peace. We are interested in your thoughts. And, obviously we can learn, and you can make us think better by raising those objections. So we aim to make you think. So with that, I'll hand it back to Brad.
Thanks, Tom.
Yep.
So just a few announcements. Check out our Liberty Rules Radio over on our friends over on blogtalk.com. They have a liberty-oriented show that is quite entertaining and good friends of Tom's.
Yep. Paulo.
We also listen to Paul on the Political Paradox podcast, which is at politicalparadox.ca.
Yep.
Upcoming, getting right around the corner, Tom,
Yep.
is AgroFest 2015 at the Ville Marie Conference Center, which is just south of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, September 22nd to the 27th. So please save that date.
24th to the 27th, sorry.
I'm sorry, 24th to the 22nd.
Yep.
7th.
Yep.
And then, surprise, whoops, you missed Freedom Fest.
Yes, I just thought that'd be funny. So you missed it if you didn't go.
But so the reason we put it in there, of course, is to what you think about maybe trying to do it next year.
Absolutely.
And it's held, it was held July 8th to the 11th in Las Vegas.
Yes, and it'll probably be about that time next year is my guess.
Probably so, I would guess. As Tom said, check us out on Facebook. We'd love to hear your, I guess you didn't say that, but that's where you'd be best to communicate with us, is check out our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/annoyingpeasantradio. For a variety of postings, thanks as always to Tanya, Tim, and Cassie for their efforts. And our next show will be next Tuesday, July 21st at 7 p.m. Central Time. So please join us live. If you haven't done so, we'd appreciate you doing so. And we appreciate you listening no matter when or how you're listening to us. So thanks again.
Absolutely. I just want to, I think I caught this on Facebook earlier today, and I just thought that was interesting because a common objection, and you may have run into this as well, Brad, is people say, well, if you think things are unfree or you object to these, what I'll call violations of your liberties, and you speak out against it, a lot of people say, well, basically, if you don't like it, get out, right? You can always leave. If it's so terrible here, just leave. And I think partly that's misunderstood by people. It's like, hey, I'm not saying this is the worst place on the planet by any stretch. I'm just saying it could be improved. And I always find that many people find that very objectionable, that you're supposed to just leave it the way it is. Don't even talk about how things may or may be improved, may or may not be improved, or at least just have the discussion about it, right? A lot of people want to shut that out. But and the way they do that, again, is, hey, if you don't like it, just get out of here. But This is something I caught on Facebook I thought was interesting. This was a quote. It says, "Your very willingness to reside here under said constitutions says you agree to it." And here's and again, that's common. Some people say, well, hey, that's the laws of the land. If you don't like it, get out, right? And I can, in a sense, I understand what they're saying. I do kind of get that. But think about this for a second. I think this will maybe shed some light on the position of at least myself and maybe quite a number of other supporters of the freedom philosophy. Think about the colonists, right, who didn't agree with the established government at the time, like pre-1776, right? But they continued to reside in their homes, and they objected to the form of government that they had, right? And I don't know if form of government is exactly right because I can't speak for these people, but, obviously they had some objections. Okay, if we can leave it at that. But think about it. As stated in the Declaration of Independence, they withdrew their consent, and we read the Declaration of Independence a week or 2 or 3 back. I can't remember when on the show. Right? They withdrew their consent to be governed, and the government no longer had just power over them. Right? They threw off the British government at the time, and they didn't leave their homes to do it. And yes, some fellows did because they eventually came to war. So they temporarily displaced themselves to fight their battles. But essentially, right, they held their properties. They stayed here. Their families stayed here. So they weren't forced to, well, hey, if you don't like it, get out. Right? And most people see their actions as justified. Now, the part I would really have trouble with is the violence part of it. And I think the better way to do things is through peaceful discourse, right? And to have a better case, make a case for your freedom. And that's in part what we try to do here in every single episode of this show. But I just wanted to point that out because I think that's a very common thing. Hey, if you don't like it, get out. Then what would you say to the freedom fighters, the founding fathers of this country, however you want to describe that, right? I think you're in direct contradiction to the founding of this country if you say that. But again, I guess some people that doesn't really bother them. But I do think that's important to point out. So that's why I did. Anyway, with that,
I think it's important to say that we don't hate America. We by and large, the show represents hopefully a thought-provoking approach to helping people to think about what America is or isn't and whether or not that's okay with them.
Yeah, and a way forward, right, to do it peacefully and to have greater liberties. I don't see that as such a terrible thing.
Nope.
But again, how discourse happens with people is, of course, partly on us, how we create this discussion and how we do it in a way that hopefully people see it as a little more, maybe just for the intelligent layman. I mean, that's where we are, right? We think about these things, and we're not trying to say, hey, we're going to jam this down your throat. This is the way it ought to be, and if you don't agree with us or you don't believe it, you don't understand it, you're an idiot. It's, hey, check this stuff out. Read some of it on your own. Listen to some of these sound clips we're going to play. Think about this a little bit. What do you think? Does this make sense?
I'm sorry. Did you just call us intelligent laymen?
Yeah. Maybe we're sitting down so we can't be laymen. Haha, that was funny.
Gee, Tom, thanks. That's the nicest thing anybody's ever said.
There you go. See? Nothing but compliments on this show, Brad.
There you go. Okay, so we're going to go to the news?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's remind everybody that you're listening to the Northern Peasant Radio Show. Thanks again for joining us. This is Brad, and I'm joined by my good friend Tom. So, top news story. We talked about it in sort of the beginning of the show. Our fine governor of the state of Wisconsin, being kind of funny there.
Yes.
Scott Walker has joined the presidential hopefuls as of today. Where did he announce that, Tom? Do you know?
Yes, it was in the big town of Waukesha, apparently.
There you go. And so, so you've got an audio clip, which I had a chance to preview, thanks to you. I had read about his announcement, and so I think it'd be cool if you could. Can you cue that up and play it for us, Tom?
To the best of my knowledge, I think I'm ready. But you never know when you hit play, you never know what happens. So here's Scott Walker making his announcement. And I think this is like 3.5 minutes long, but I don't know if I'll play it all. But here we go. Hopefully, and here he is. Here he is.
Now think about that. 4 years later, graduation rates are up. Third grade reading scores are higher. And Wisconsin's ACT scores are now second best in the country. Our reforms work. That just goes to show that government closest to the people is generally the best, which is precisely why we need to take power.
Hang on a second. I think it's a little, I moved it back, but I think it was advanced. I want to get right back to the very beginning because I liked his, well, I shouldn't say, I liked it from the standpoint of I want to talk about it. Hopefully I got it here now at the very beginning.
Okay.
I'm hitting play and it hasn't started yet, so I don't know what the... I think my...
America great.
There we go.
Is the fact that America is a can-do kind of country. Unfortunately, we have a government in Washington that just can't quite seem to get the job done. You know, Washington, or as I call it, 68 square miles surrounded by reality. Well, the good news is it's not too late. We can turn things around. To do that, we need new, fresh...
Oh, it just died on
leadership.
Oh, there it is.
Leadership with big, bold ideas from outside of Washington. The kind of leadership that knows how to get things done, like we've done here in Wisconsin. Now think about that. 4 years later...
Okay, I think that's, enough of what he says. You know, he makes fun of Washington. He says, hey, well, Washington, I call it 68 square miles surrounded by reality. My real overall question on this whole stuff is, obviously he's trying to position himself as an outsider to Washington, which I guess obviously is. He's a governor. He's not in the federal government. I don't know. Definitely not an outsider politically. I can't even tell you how long has he been governor? 4 years, 6 years, something like that.
I think it's 6-ish. Okay.
Because he got elected, he got recalled, got reelected, and has he gotten reelected again on a regular term yet? I can't even...
Yes, he did. He was.
Okay.
In his second term after the recall term.
Okay. So, obviously, he's won a number of elections, so he knows how to politic. He apparently is I don't follow the stuff, but he's a good campaigner. And apparently, for me, the part that drives me nuts is apparently that's what sells. It's not the issues per se, it's how you present yourself is what matters to people. It's the wrapping that matters. It's not what is in the package. And I'm not saying that Scott Walker is a bad person. I never met the man, so I can't tell you which way it is there. But the rhetoric is, I don't know, I want to fight for you on, all this stuff. I mean, listen to these other 15 Republican candidates, and heck, for that matter, I don't even remember how many are on the Democratic side. Hillary, Bernie Sanders, and at least two more. I can't think of Mallory or Malloy was one of them, and there's another. I can't remember the names. But so you're looking at least 20 possibilities for next year. Yeah, I guess the election is next year. But the rhetoric is so similar in many cases. And my question really is largely born out of, okay, I think I've heard this rhetoric before. I think I've heard it a number of times. And how have things been working for you, right? I assume people voted for people who used that rhetoric before. So are things significantly improved? Have things changed? Have your liberties been restored? And that's kind of, my point about the whole voting cycle and everything. And then specifically to Scott Walker, the last, day or so, I've been hearing, too, the whole deal about apparently he does not have a, BS or a bachelor's degree. And some people want to make a deal out of that, and I think that's kind of humorous myself. But it's just, again, it's amazing how they make issues out of stuff that has nothing really to do with, first of all, do you support these policies of this guy? And do you think he's actually going to be able to execute what he claims he wants to do? I think is probably more important than whether he has a degree or not. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that in because obviously we're broadcasting from Wisconsin. We happen to know Walker maybe a little better than some other people do. But any of your thoughts in there, Brad? Is there something I should have mentioned that I did not?
Well, I think that, I mean, I almost think that his commentary of why he's doing this and what he wants to do is could just be absolutely cliche. I mean, he touches on, mom, apple pie, and Chevrolet.
Yep.
He's going to ride a Harley. It's all part of that. And he's going to ride a Harley to all the counties in Iowa and New Hampshire.
Okay.
And that's America, darn it. And
yep.
And so, what I found it interesting when he talks about taking, what do you say? We're going to take back the federal money and bring it back to the state or to the states,
sure.
Something like that. But he doesn't say we're gonna do anything other than keep spending that money.
Right.
We're just going to let it be spent and be decided upon locally. I suppose there could be people that could argue that that's to our and any state's advantage, but at the same time, it's still a form of government that we would disagree with.
Yep. But it's the way I try to say it is, hey, I agree with the trajectory, right? Instead of the money going to the feds, if it goes to the state, I would argue keep that trajectory going. It's probably better if it just goes to the county, and then just keep going to the township, to the city. Keep it, and then eventually keep it in your pocket, and then you decide what you want to purchase and what you don't want to purchase.
Very well said.
Right? Just keep that trajectory going. So that's the part I can't argue with, the trajectory. You can argue with the justice of it all, and I think that's maybe more important. But I get that part.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I don't find him to be the most dynamic dude in the world, but you don't have to be a dynamic dude to be a smart guy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just picking on him there. And I think that it's just going to be interesting to see how he fares with all this. I know none of these guys jump in the ring if they're not funded fairly well. I think he's funded very well.
Oh.
And so, it takes money to do this. I forget the amount of money that I heard that it was going to take our nation to elect this next president.
It's going to be in the billions. I know that.
Madness.
Yeah, it's madness. And people, usually it's the people who say, well, we should get the money out of politics. If you don't pay attention on your own accord, you can only get hit kind of by advertisement. So you're actually encouraging the money being in the whole political arena, because otherwise you wouldn't know about it, right? So it depends on how you look at it. And again, I'm using this argument from the perspective of someone who supports the basic system, right? If you think it's important to vote and all this stuff, well, then you ought to pay attention. Right, and the truth of the matter is most people don't, and they even argue that, hey, very few people even start paying attention until it gets very close to the election. So it just seems absurd, all this money and all this posturing and all this stuff. And it's also crazy. I'm assuming, I don't know anything directly about Walker, but I'm assuming this is as you mentioned, the Harley rides and all this stuff. This is his handlers saying, hey, we can associate with Harley Davidson, which is a uniquely American company. To my knowledge, all their manufacturing is within the United States. But again, where are these components built? Are they all in the United States? I have no idea. But, it's Harley is associated with freedom and, the freedom of being on the road and all this stuff. So I assume this is a handler thing that's, kind of saying this is how we do this. This is how we portray you in public to make you more popular. And that's the stuff that all kind of drives me nuts. But apparently it sells, and that's what people like. So he's just trying to provide the type of campaign that people apparently want. And we'll know that at the end, right? If they vote for him, that'll be an endorsement of, yep, that's what they wanted to see. If he doesn't do this well, then, obviously his handlers weren't as good as we thought they might be. But I also agree, yeah, a guy doesn't even make this announcement unless he believes he has the funds secured or he has a high likelihood of securing those funds. So again, what do you have to do to gain those funds? You know, has he made agreements with certain contributors to say, hey, you know, I'll do things this way if you guys support me and get me into office, you know, all this stuff. It's interesting how this shakes out, and the fact that I believe actually you have to sell out or to the system to even run. But again, obviously that's up to everybody's interpretation. That's really not an argument built on liberty. It's just my observation of this candidacy and the whole political wranglings that go on. You know, we actually can't do the Iran nuke deal because, believe it or not, where I was going to do my quote, and hopefully it's rebuilding here. I was going to have another audio clip, and I see my shockwave crash, but maybe it's coming back. It might be reloading here. I don't. If there's anything else you had on Walker?
Nope.
Okay. Let's see. I don't think it's completely reloaded here. So what do we? The 14 sentences. Oh, here we go. Here's Obama.
Today, after 2 years of negotiations,
the Iran nuke deal.
The United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not. A comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon. This deal demonstrates that American diplomacy can bring about real and meaningful change. Change that makes our country and the world safer and more secure. This deal is also in line with a tradition of American leadership. Because of this deal, we will, for the first time, be in a position to verify all of these commitments. That means this deal is not built on trust. It is built on verification. Inspectors will have 24/7 access to Iran's key nuclear facilities. Iran will have access to Iran's entire nuclear supply chain, its uranium mines and mills, its conversion facility, and its centrifuge manufacturing and storage facilities. This ensures that Iran will not be able to divert materials from known facilities to covert ones. Some of these transparency measures will be in place for 25 years. Because of this deal, inspectors will also be able to access any suspicious location. Put simply, the organization responsible for the inspections, the IAEA, will have access where necessary, when necessary. That arrangement is permanent. As Iran takes steps to implement this deal, it will receive relief from the sanctions that we put in place because of Iran's nuclear program, both America's own sanctions and sanctions imposed by the United Nations Security Council. This relief will be phased in. Iran must complete key nuclear steps before it begins to receive new sanctions relief. And over the course of the next decade, Iran must abide by the deal before additional sanctions are lifted. All of this will be memorialized and endorsed in a new United Nations Security Council resolution. And if Iran violates the deal, all these sanctions will snap back into place. So there's a very clear incentive for Iran to follow through, and there are very real consequences for a violation. I am confident that this deal will meet the national security interests of the United States and our allies. So I will veto any legislation that prevents the successful implementation of this deal.
And the other part at the end of that was, as he ended, as every president, to my knowledge, has, God bless you and God bless America. We're always the good news is, and you can sleep well because God is always on our side. That's the handy thing. Anyway, I thought it was important to play that so everybody could hear, basically exactly what Obama had to say. Now, what he had to say, the words, I would argue, actually pretty good. The way he says it, I don't know what's in that deal. If anything that he said, is if it's directly reflective of exactly what's in that deal and how that deal works, that doesn't sound so bad. Where if the terms are violated, this snaps back, all the sanctions go back. Again, I'll have to back up. I'm not a sanctions fan. That's a whole nother discussion. I don't think it changes policy. It doesn't work. It just hurts the civilians which if you think about it is really kind of a dumb idea. Don't you want to help those citizens and know if it be known that that help came from the United States? Wouldn't people be warming up to the United States? Instead, they're suffering hardship as a result of sanctions. Won't they be hardened to the United States in the rhetoric of the United States instead, right? So if you want to change the government's policies, I don't think that's an effective tool, and I would argue, again, this is just observation. It's best based on what I understand. It doesn't appear that it actually works. So I think it's cruel to those people. Anyway, so I just had a couple other things. The idea that, hey, some of this stuff stays in place for 25 years. Inspectors will have 24/7 access to those key facilities. Again, in rhetoric, if that's the way it works, I mean, it sounds a little better than a lot of other deals the United States has made with other governments. But again, in a sense, for me, there's no relevance here. And I know people say, what are you talking about? They have a nuclear weapon. They could send it over here and kill you. Well, the relevance is these are two governments negotiating with each other, and I am not part of the government. I am not them. So it's these two other guys chatting, and you can argue, well, they have the ability to kill you. Yeah, that's the dangerous thing. That's why I'm against the state. So anyway, anything I missed in that, Brad? Anything you found interesting that I did not point out?
No, I agree. I think that broadly it would be kind of hard to argue with the broad context of this. Yes, philosophically, sanctions and so forth, we could make commentary towards, and you have, but we're proponents of peace and civil dialogue. I'm not sure that this was carved out in peace and civil dialogue. I think that it was carved out with a big stick.
Yep.
But at the same time, your point, the most important point is that we have two groups of diplomats that are negotiating everything for their citizens. And one of the stories that I heard today was about how progressive the population of Iran is. Very high level of education, very much interested in, at least according to this report, progress, and very hopeful that the lifting of sanctions would be a good thing for their society.
Yeah, in the words of Rothbard, which I happen to agree with, I see both those groups as criminal gangs of thieves, and they're negotiating. And as Tanya pointed out, they both have the ability to kill me, and that's the part that makes me very uncomfortable. So, and
if this works out and it can divert killing a whole bunch of innocent people, as other conflicts have not done such a good job at.
Right.
I guess that's an upside.
Yeah, this would be another deal where I'd make maybe the case. Maybe it's a crappy case, but it's a trajectory deal. Is it better maybe than it was? If it is what he says it is, then sounds like it. But again, I would. I'm not a big fan of the criminal gang of thieves to begin with. So, anything there, or should we? This next one is kind of interesting. The commutations of sentences. Oh, geez, again, I don't know what the deal is. Well, I could. Oh, crap! This letter, actually. Okay, so I don't know if you want to set this up, Brad, and tell people what happened here. This with Demaryius Thomas.
Yep, Demaryius Thomas is, what is he, a Cowboy?
Denver Bronco.
I'm sorry, Denver Bronco.
Your man Peyton throws him the ball.
My boy Peyton throws him the ball. And so Thomas's grandmother, Minnie Thomas, was arrested for narcotics and trafficking in 1999. And she's been in prison since Demaryius Thomas was 11 years old. And she was scheduled to be released in 2017. While Minnie Thomas, I guess, I'm not sure which one's which, is serving a life sentence. So the President Obama commuted 46 sentences, including hers, and now she'll be being released in on November 10th.
Yeah, I thought the letter, I'm assuming Obama didn't write it himself, but that he signed. Did you see that in the article?
Yeah, I'll read it really quickly. It says, Dear Jerry, who I don't know who Jerry is, Federal Corrections Institute.
Yes.
I want to personally inform you that I will be granting your application for commutation. The power to grant pardons and clemency is one of the most profound authorities granted to the President of the United States. It embodies the basic belief in our democracy that people deserve a second chance after having made a mistake in their lives that led to a conviction under our laws. Thousands of individuals have applied for, am I saying that right?
Yep.
Commutation?
Yep.
And only a fraction of these applications are approved. I am granting your application because you have demonstrated the potential to turn your life around. Now is it up to you to make the most of this opportunity. It will not be easy, and you will be confronted many people who doubt with criminal records. People with criminal records can change. Perhaps even you are unsure of how you will adjust to your new circumstances. But remember that you have the capacity to make good choices. By doing so, you will affect not only your own life, but those close to you. You will also influence, through your example, the possibility that others in your circumstances get their own second chance in the future. I believe in your ability to prove the doubters wrong and change your life for the better. So good luck and Godspeed.
Actually, overall, I would say I thought it was a pretty good letter, and I'm cool with the second chance thing, right, and giving people chances. But, and I guess here's the really big but part. He admits that there's problems with the judicial system, right? Let me see. It embodies the belief that people deserve a second thousands of individuals. I'm trying to think where you have the most dealt with. He talks about the judicial system. Where am I missing that now? People, Jews, I can't find it.
I didn't see it either.
Anyway, there's one that basically area that he says, hey, we basically have problems in the judicial system, and I would argue, well, why don't, if you're in that, you're part of the administration as the president, why don't you work to fix those things instead of...
Tom, it's in the quote of the body of the article. It says, these unduly harsh sentences are one of the reasons the president is committed to using all the tools at his disposal to remedy unfairness in our criminal justice system.
Right. So he's saying there's unfairness in it, and I'm saying why not address that, right, instead of, as a president, commuting sentences that you just reviewed. And I don't know how they determine this. I don't know if it's just Obama's whim. In this particular case, there'll always be the accusation that, well, since this guy's Demaryius Thomas, a football player, maybe he got special treatment. And I have no idea. I'm just saying that may be a question in this case. And if it is that question, raised in other cases? And the answer is, yes, because there's only 46 of them got granted out of a zillion applications, even that Obama mentions in the letter, right? So why these cases? Now, to that end, on this case, I would argue the laws are wrong in the first place. There's no violation of property rights if the description here, right, if his mother was involved in, or his grandmother, whatever it was, right, they were trafficking drugs. My point is this relates to free markets and what we're going to talk about here in a second. It's a voluntary exchange. It really shouldn't be against the law, but he's not addressing that either, is my point. Again, he's in a position where he maybe could really push things to change things, but for some reason he doesn't want to, and one of the reasons may be, obviously I have no idea what's in the man's head, is, you look a whole lot more powerful and... granting of second chances makes you look better, right? Saying, hey, I'm going to just, red line this one, and it's going to be me who does it. So he's fully responsible for granting these people a second chance. Right? In other words, if if he corrected the system and therefore he would not need this authority to commute sentences, you don't look as powerful because you can't commute sentences. So, right, the incentives aren't there for him to actually make those changes. So this is a weird deal, right? I would object to the existence of the state. I would object that Obama or any president would have the authority to do this. But here's the weird thing. What he did, again, in this particular case, was in concert with the protection of private property rights. So I actually, in a weird way, and it's very weird for me to say this, I would actually support what he did here. And that's what's weird about a lot of these discussions, right? Like I tried to explain, I don't support the existence of the state, so therefore I don't think Obama or anybody should have this authority. But I actually agree with what he happened to do in this, given the circumstance we're in. Did I make a case there, Brad, that you think people can understand, or you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I think that's valid. I think that it shows that we are not necessarily biased towards one team or another. I think we are hopefully showing that we are consistent on our positions of desiring and believing in freedom.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So whenever, even if the quote unquote wrong guy does the right thing, it's still the right thing. That's maybe the simplest way of trying to put that. But anyway, so I just thought that was kind of interesting to throw in there, and so people kind of get a flavor of.
I think it's also somewhat fairly unusual for sitting president to be commuting sentences at this point in his term. I don't recall it being happening very often. I can recall a few pardons that occurred right as they were leaving the building.
Yep. Yeah, I think in this article it says he's 46, which is more. It was right up here in the beginning.
Yep, 46.
Yeah, but the 46 sentences are the largest number of sentences commuted by a president since the 1960s.
It's a long time.
Yeah, and I think, my guess is, and it's totally a guess, the flavor is that, wow, he's just commuting a lot of people. And he is, but I think it's kind of a negative tone there that he's commuting all these people. And again, I don't know anything about, I don't really know much about this case, but I certainly don't know anything about the other 45 people that he had sentences commuted sentences from them. But maybe they were all for the right reasons. So actually I would support them if they were, right? So the point is, it's not necessarily a negative thing. It may actually be a really good thing. Then again, it might not. You have to look at all the sentences and what he actually said there. But anyway, I just thought again, this is the deal where I'm trying to point out, in part, wherever property rights are respected or supported, I support that. I'm behind that. And I think maybe throw the show behind that, right? And whenever people are violating them or support the violation of property rights rooted in self-ownership, basically denounce it and try to point it out and show how it's a violation of your property rights. Again, as Brad said, it doesn't matter really if it's the blue team or the red team or whoever. It doesn't matter. It's the property rights is the issue. It's not who says it or what organization they happen to be associated with.
Okay, let's move on to Greece.
Greece got a bunch of loans. Last week we talked about it a little bit, I think, if I remember, if I have my episodes right.
Their ongoing financial crisis and being part of the European Union.
Yeah.
European Union.
Yes, and the deal was, right, that, hey, they may get either thrown out, they may decide to go out and go back to the drachma, which was their currency originally. I would argue probably they want to go back to the drachma for nefarious reasons, not saying that the euro isn't backed for nefarious reasons either. That, again, the same type of organization. Again, we talked about that last week then a little bit, the trajectory. Greece should be in control of their own cash. I would argue keep moving that direction. Again, it'll be wacky for people, but I'd support private money, and that's a long story unto itself. But keep the trajectory moving, which I think people kind of lose out on and think, oh, that's just better to have it in Greek and let the Greek government have monopoly control over that currency, where The European Union has monopoly control of that currency. But anyway, what I really wanted to get to a little bit on this article that I thought was interesting was I can't think of his actually Tsipras. That's his name, but I can't think of his specific title. Is he actually the president? Is he the prime minister? Yeah, he's the top holds the top political office anyway in Greece. That's the important thing.
He's a prime minister, Tom.
A prime minister. Okay. But the deal I thought was interesting. He and his right-hand man got voted into office basically on the notion that they were not going to accept these austerity measures, right? Which was basically cutting back on pensions, raising taxes, all this other stuff, cutting the budget, the federal budget of Greece. And because this largely came at the hands of the European Union saying, hey, you got to get your house in order, blah, blah, blah. And Tsipras came to power campaigning on the story that, hey, we're not doing this crap, because obviously people were pretty upset because this has been an ongoing saga for years, for those of you who wouldn't happen to know. So the bottom line is there was now this speculation on this last round, which, is always the last round. There'll always be a next round, I think. It's going to keep going. This is by no means over. But that they may get kicked out or they may leave and all this stuff might happen. Well, lo and behold here in when I say the final hours, after the deadline passed, they worked on this for a few days. So it's after the deadline. Hasn't this all happened? And now this is going to, things have to change. But then they negotiated another deal. Well, of course, the Greeks are not happy with the Germans, saying basically that the Germans are being too harsh with them. And now Tsipras agreed to this deal, or hammered out this deal with his cronies, right? All of his administration. And they have to accept, apparently a larger level of austerity than they were contemplating had they accepted the deal just before this deadline. Well, it has to come to a vote, and are the Greek people going to support this? It sounds like no. So is this even actually going to happen, this last measure? It's just kind of you can't make a soap opera any better than this. And again, I would argue all this is futile if you don't correct the underlying problems here, which is just very broadly socialism. You're not going to ever end this. So I just thought that was interesting. But from a political perspective, right? Tsipras comes into office saying we're never going to accept austerity. His right-hand man, right after hearing about the deal, says this is a bunch of crap. We shouldn't support this. And more importantly, now Tsipras is, of course, trying to support, hey, this is the best deal I could get us. I hammer out, we need to support it, which is, again, the opposite of what he campaigned on. And my little message there is, this, people think, U.S. citizens frequently think, hey, this just happens in the United States. It's universal. It happens everywhere. Guy campaigns and says one thing and then winds up understanding the realities. He's no longer a campaigner. He's now a prime minister, so his perspective changes maybe. And I don't know all the factors that are in play here. Obviously, that's just one of potentially many. And he changes his tune. So, again, I would argue it's another thing for, hey, voting doesn't work. How's that work? How's it working for the Greek people? I often say that on this show to people, how's it working for you? Well, how's it working for the Greek people? So anyway, I think that's kind of, I kind of hammered that out, unless there's something you want to add or if there's something interesting I missed, Brad?
Nope, I think it's ongoing, and I bet we're talking about this again in a few years.
Yes.
If not sooner.
I agree. All right. We want to talk a little bit about free markets.
Okay. Why do you think I want to talk about this, Tom?
I think there's probably a number of reasons in play, so I'm not going to speculate. I'll let you tell me.
Okay. So we talk a lot in this show about freedom. We talk a lot in this show about the central state and its unfairness and its biased and its ability to be, in my opinion, bribed by those who want to get their way. And so we always, I think very frequently, we come back and we wind up kind of concluding that, hey, the free market would be a better way to do it. And the free market should decide.
Yes.
And I thought it would be relevant to talk about, because I think, again, like everybody in this country, by and large, thinks they're free and they have freedoms. They have great freedom. And I wouldn't argue that it's more freedom than other countries, for sure. But we both believe that it could be far greater freedom. And so I wanted to talk about what the same, kind of along the same lines, that I think a lot of people go, well, that's what we have, Brad. Come on, dude. We are in the free market. The free market decides. Why do we need to talk about this? I couldn't disagree more. I think that we are under a controlled market.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I would argue that's absolutely true. We're in a hampered market. But one thing I find interesting, I think what you say generally reflects what I hear at least a lot of people say, that, hey, we already have free market. Why will we even talk about this? But every time there's a financial crisis, which is really if you think about what I just said, every time there's there should be no financial crisis, right? I mean, it's a joke that there's financial crisis. But every time something happens, or to some degree, I would argue a manufactured crisis. Do you remember healthcare? Right, it was a crisis levels, and that's why things had to be changed. My point is, when those things happen, people blame the free markets. They say, hey, these banks, these medical insurers, these medical care providers, etc., have to be regulated. That's why we have these problems, right? So that at the same time that they say we have free markets, we say a lot of people claim they have to be regulated. We can't have free markets. To me, it's a mixed-up message in general that I hear. And again, that's not a comment on any one person. I'm not saying any one person is inconsistent. I can't really say that. But I do think in general the rhetoric that we hear from public opinion, et cetera, is very inconsistent. On one hand, we already have free market. Why are we talking about this? On the other hand, the reason we had this financial crisis and medical crisis and all these other crises is because we have free markets and they got to be regulated. Well, haven't they been regulating these things for 200 plus years, right? And if they have so been regulated and we support regulation and that's what makes things right, that's the thing makes things fair, right? That makes what makes things work. Well, they've been regulated for 200 plus years. How's that work? And then how we have this crisis if they've been regulated? And again, people say, well, they need to be regulated more. And well, there's no end to that call in my view. We can always regulate stuff more. But I think in practice, you can look back and go, well, apparently this regulation is not working. But you got us off on a little bit of regulation. But yeah, so my point is, free markets are wildly misunderstood, in my opinion.
So just to kind of hit the basics here, Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines a free market as an economic market or system in which prices are based on competition among private businesses and not controlled by a government.
I mean, I would kind of agree with that. I mean, I would say that's true. For me, again, I'm such a simpleton. Things are more fundamental to me than that. If you look back, go, okay, well, I think that's a generally accepted definition, what you read there.
Sure it is.
Are commonly accepted. I think that's how people understand it. But again, I think more fundamentally it's a summary of voluntary exchanges. This is the Austrian economics part kind of coming out here.
Which is why I want to talk about this.
Okay. Do you want me to go here for a moment, or do you have something else on?
So we also talked on the show. I just said yes, and you can go, but
yeah.
I started talking again. Sorry.
But
we talk a lot about that concept, Tom, of a voluntary exchange, where you have something that I want, and I have something you want, and we negotiate a term and then the conditions in which we both get out of it what we each feel is fair or choose to agree to.
Yes, it's a title transfer is really what we're doing. I don't know, pencil for a chicken. I don't know what the right in any goofy example. We transfer the titles of ownership to those two things if we agree. And the thing to point out that's really important, I think, is if it's voluntary, no one is being coerced. That's the other type of exchange. Right? In other words, essentially, you do it under your own free will. There's not me or another third party saying to Brad, hey, Brad, if you don't make this deal, I'm going to break your legs. If you don't make this deal, if you don't make this exchange, I'm going to do something even worse to you. That would be an example of a coerced exchange, right? So it's just a simple exchange of, hey, chicken for the pencil, that sounds good. Brad's thinking, hey, that sounds a good deal to me, and I'm thinking, hey, that sounds a good deal to me. We make the exchange. That is, by definition, a voluntary exchange. And by definition, we're both better off. That's why we make the exchange, because I think I'm better off with that chicken, and Brad thinks he's better off with the pencil. Right? So the point is, wealth is actually created by a voluntary exchange. And then if you step back for just wealth that is created, and the answer is yes. Right? And you say, well, okay, wait a minute. So if that's true, and I know some people aren't swallowing that right now, how could we facilitate more exchanges? And that's where money comes from, right? Because now I got the pencil, and I think Trigger's trying to join us right now. So, well, see, it's going to take me a second. We'll see if I can get him in here. Oh, darn it. Here we go. Maybe. Maybe not. Hey, Trigger, you there? Oh.
Are you back, Tom?
I'm there. I think I got Trigger. Are you there now, Trigger? Oh, maybe I don't have him. Are you there, Brad?
I am.
Oh, well. It shows that I have him, but I don't. You want to discuss about it, Brad? Did I lose you, Brad? Sorry. Doggone it. I don't know. Let me go back. Do I have you, Brad? Doggone it. I think I lost Brad for the moment here. Let me try to add him back. I apologize for that. Well, it shows I can't call him because I have him, but I cannot hear him. So I'm going to end that call, and I'm going to try calling him back. Sorry for this, everybody. Let's, there we go. It's calling Brad back. So here we go. Hey, Brad, sorry.
Man, we got some crazy stuff going on, Tom.
Yeah, I tried to add Trigger, and I don't know. It showed I had you both, and I couldn't hear either one of you after a while, so I don't know what happened. Anyway, right, so to facilitate more exchanges, that's one of the reasons that money was essentially came into play. So you can more easily make these exchanges. You don't have to do a direct barter or obviously indirect barter with, three people, a three-way deal, just like they do in trades in the NFL and NBA and stuff like that. Or you could just do it straight away with money. So that's what's partly what enhances wealth. So that's a voluntary exchange. And again, the difference there is I'm saying in a voluntary exchange, wealth is necessarily created. The difference between that and a coerced exchange is wealth is necessarily destroyed. So anytime, because right, there's a gun to Brad's head. If you don't make this deal, I'm gonna shoot you in the foot or something. Well, the point is that's a deal that Brad wouldn't have made on his own. Right? That's why someone held a gun to his head to make him do the deal. Well, why wouldn't he do it? Because he believes he's not better off. He's actually worse off. So he wouldn't do it. So there's the illustration of how the wealth is actually destroyed. So that's the big broad picture. In a voluntary exchange, wealth is necessarily created, and a coerced exchange, wealth is necessarily destroyed. So that's kind of a little depiction there. So I know there's probably a different angle that you wanted to get into, but I just thought it was important for people to understand that.
No, it's good. That's good because I had that. There's some other ingredients, again, as a layperson, that I guess I would view is that it's affected by supply and demand.
Absolutely. And what triggers, supply? In other words, what increases the supply or why is the supply decreased? It's the price, right? I've used the example before, because some of the thing I say, that the current market in the U.S. is not a free market. It's a hampered market, which we already alluded to earlier. But people, well, how's it hampered? Of course, it's a free market. We all know it's a free market, right? The basic case that you made to begin with. And if you think about it, it's all of these regulations that are in place, right? Like minimum wage laws, work rules and hiring practices, tariffs that are placed on things, trade restrictions, sanctions in the news here, whatever, a couple weeks ago or a week or more ago. All the interstate commerce laws, the price gouging restrictions, which I'm going to get to here in just a second. Minimum standards for health care plans, right? You can't offer that plan because it doesn't meet the government's minimum standard. Building regulations and codes, and all the other federal and state laws, codes, regulations, ordinances, all that. Other things move as a result. So the point is, Apple phone maybe is, well, I'll use the plywood, the oriented strand board, these things that are needed in case of a hurricane or before and directly after. There's now laws, those price gouging laws. If you don't allow, think of Home Depot, and I don't have any direct knowledge with Home Depot other than macroscopically. They have supply chain that's continually supplying their stores all over the country. So now in order to attract that product there, if they can get a higher price from New Orleans, and we can get more money for that product, right? So the higher the price improves or increases the supply. So when you allude to supply and demand, the price tells suppliers things. It's like, hey, this is in high demand, move more product there, or manufacture more product, right? Or import more product, or whatever the case may be. So a price not hampered by regulation tells manufacturers what is demanded, right, by the marketplace. On the other hand, on the consumer side, when I look at that and I see a high price, it tells me that, hey, that item is in really high demand. Maybe I should seek alternatives, right? And something that's cheaper, more readily available, or whatever the case may be. It has become scarce, is what a high price tells me. So now I know what is readily available or plentiful, and I also know what is scarce if you allow the price to move in a free market, right? Just through voluntary exchanges. Once you enter into this and regulate and do things, now I don't know exactly what the prices are telling me, so I don't know what's scarce and I don't know what's abundant. So now I make decisions based on, skewed information. So I may be continually trying to buy something that's scarce, and one good example of this that's current is water in California, right? The price is not allowed to go up, so I just keep buying it. Why wouldn't I? It doesn't cost me any more. They keep claiming it's scarce, but the price is low. Why wouldn't I just water my lawn? And I realize in that case there's other things, public pressure, your reputation, right? There's all that stuff in play. But the price would do it, and it would do it much more directly, I would argue. And therefore resources would be used much more efficiently in a free market than they are in a hampered market or a regulated market. And there's so many other beauties that happen as a result of voluntary exchanges versus coerced exchanges. Again, ultimately, I would argue the Greens, the people who are all environmentalists, should be all over this. Yes, we want resources used in the most efficient way. That's what we're after. But they think that regulation is what does that. And I think it's, again, as we open, I think this is widely misunderstood what a free market actually is, how it works, how it acts, and how it actually is the most efficient resource rationing system there is. So, I might have gone too far down a rabbit hole for you there, Brad.
Nope, that was perfect, because the opposite is also true. If there is an overabundance of something, then if I have too many of something, and I want something else of another, or I want to get my money back and go buy something else that's going to make me more money.
Yep.
I'm likely to reduce the cost, reduce the price.
Yes.
Of what I have to sell to get rid of it, so I can go on to the next one.
Because at a higher price, you have no buyers.
Correct.
Right, so you can't cash out. But it also, again, tells the buyers, hey, this stuff is abundant. It's everywhere, right? That's why it costs so little. That's why the price is so low, I should say. Right? Again, so the free-floating prices is kind of the rhetoric that's used for that, really do convey a whole lot of information that, again, most people may not fully understand or think about. They just go, hey, it's cheap. I'm going to buy more radishes instead of corn on the cob. That happens to be, really expensive today. Well, that's what it tells you. So seek alternatives in the event, you can find some that you are satisfied with.
So then the other thing I was going to mention on this is then people go, well, yeah, we have a free market, but we need regulation too to prevent X, Y, or Z.
Yes, and that's an excellent thing to bring out, Brad, because I think if you look again back at the fundamentals that, a free market is just a summary of voluntary exchanges. When you say a regulation should be enter into that free market, if you will, then by definition it's no longer a free market, right?
Right.
You can't say I support a free market that's regulated. It's a contradiction in terms.
Exactly.
But think more fundamentally about that. What you're really saying is, no. I don't think there should only be voluntary exchanges. I think what makes things more efficient is to also have at least some portion of those exchanges be coerced exchanges, right? And again, if you can follow the definition that we laid out earlier, what you're saying is we have to have some exchanges that destroy wealth. That's what makes us better off. Then I hope that sounds like a crazy contradiction to people, right? The destruction of wealth happens to make us poorer, not richer. And that's one of the many reasons, right? If you don't allow those prices to move, a consumer is making decisions based on concealed information. They don't know the real or the true story. And that's one of the many fundamental problems with socialism, right? It's a completely controlled market. They don't allow prices to float. So the fellas on the Cotton Council, right, they don't know whether cotton is actually abundant or not. They're trying to figure that out by looking at, production numbers that are reported, statistics and all this stuff. But I'm saying they're actually making a fundamental mistake. It would be very easy. A whole lot of information gets conveyed to them in very short order if they just had a price system that was based on voluntary exchanges. It would tell them very quickly. If the price was really high, they go, ooh, either A, we have a small crop of cotton coming this year, or we have an unusually high spike in demand, or possibly both. But again, it's a way to encourage you to seek alternatives, which they wouldn't know. They can't know. And therefore, they wind up using resources much less efficiently. They wind up destroying wealth. I don't see how you get wealthier by destroying wealth. I think you get wealthier by creating it. So,
okay. So then, I think it's a really important point that what we just talked about. That's kind of one of the crux of my interest in covering this topic is in our current system, it talks out of one side of its mouth about free market, free market, free market. And on the other side, and I think it's well kind of embraced by the public and by lay people to go, well, but if the market isn't free and somebody takes over, then I think we need to regulate them.
Yes, that's the weird thing. I had a discussion with a family member about regulations, and actually they happen to be lake regulations. Mm-hmm. And I know this is a little near and dear to your heart, and I said, here's the funky thing about them is they ultimately, she was complaining that some rich guy on this lake got to do what he wanted. He just paid the fine. And I said, yeah, see, once you create this system of regulation, people who have the resources can now wrest control of it because, I can go up there to the building department and say, hey, I'll slip you a cool $5 bill if you let me give me an exemption to this rule, right?
Right.
Well, there's a little difference if a guy walks in there and says, hey, I'll slip you a cool, $100,000 bill, right? The point is a regulator is buyable, right? And every regulator has a different price, their different situation, right? It may not be a direct payment of cash. I get that. But essentially, for argument purposes, you say it all boils down to that, right? Hey, if you get my cousin Vinny a job, then I'll let you go on this one, or I'll make this exception, right? Or if you help me and this other guy in the bureaucracy out, we can make this happen for you as long as you do us this favor. Or, the typical thing for a politician is what we talk a little bit about Scott Walker earlier. Hey, did he have to make some promises to some either real or potential donors and say, hey, I'll go this way on these issues if you guys support me? Which is essentially a payment for that.
Right.
Right? That's what happens when you create such a system. Now, there is no such mechanism in a free market. Right? If some company selling screwdrivers that I think are unsafe, I have options. I don't buy those screwdrivers. Maybe I found even a cheaper one that I think is safer. Right? I buy that. I'm telling that company, I like your product. I encourage you to use the resources you have at your disposal to make more of them. That's ultimately what they understand when there's a purchase made of their product. They go, sold that sucker. Let's make another one. See if we can sell another one. Right? And the company who didn't get the sale is, man, our product's not selling. I wonder why. Right? And when they knowingly do something wrong in a free market, I would argue in broader, in a free society, which means a legal system, right, that's, I would argue, different than what we have now, when there's not a monopoly on the courts and the police and these things. I argue these companies that do these unscrupulous things, the only thing that comes to my head at the moment is Ford with the Pinto, the rear ends, the gas tank leaked, and they did the analysis that, hey, it would cost us, whatever, $15 million to fix it. We think we're looking at, this many cases, and we're going to pay out roughly this much per case. We'll just have the people die, and we'll pay out. It'll be cheaper, right? This was all discovered. This is years ago. I think this was actually partly a Ralph Nader deal, if I remember right. Sure. But when that happens, a society that doesn't have a monopoly on the courts and the police and stuff, I think would deal with these companies much harsher than they have been dealt with. In other words, they gain protections from the state. Again, where most people, alluding to what you just said, is see these regulations as protecting the consumer. I would argue in an overwhelming majority of cases, they actually protect the producer side. And I know a lot of times it's not directly discernible or visible, right? It appears that they're trying to help me when actually they're not. That's the rhetoric, right? Because the rhetoric doesn't sound good to go, here's the deal. I'm going to help IBM become even huger. Those guys got to make even more billions. No politician wins that way. Right? You win as Scott Walker says, I'm going to fight for you. I'm fighting for America. Well, what does he actually mean? Right? If he's saying I support the free market, well, I support that rhetoric then. If there's some other hidden stuff in there, now I don't know how hidden it is anymore. then I don't support it. It's just kind of, so, that's kind of where I come from. Again, the other point I need to make on this that's really important is a voluntary exchange, a free market, is in concert with self-ownership, something that I opened the show with, right? It's not that it's in concert with those things by coincidence. This is all interconnected. We talked about context earlier. Hopefully you could see how this starts to come together. This is not just a bunch of disjointed things that I happen to support a free market, I happen to support this, I happen to not support that. That's not what's going on here. This all boils down to self-ownership and private property rights. All right, what else?
So one of the last points I'd make is something that a real key thing that you've taught me. So let's go back to the screwdriver thing.
Okay.
Example. So somebody makes a better, more cost-effective screwdriver. You're making that, and I'm making the good old standard screwdriver that I've been making year after year after year after year, that I've been collecting a whole bunch of big profit on, and then you come out and you come up with a better one. And it's, for whatever reason, maybe it's better and more expensive. Maybe it's the same thing as mine or something like that, and it's less. What does that provoke in me if I want to stay in business?
Exactly.
I'm going to have to innovate.
Yes.
I'm going to have to do something to survive.
Yes.
And I think that's to me a very key ingredient in the benefit of a free market. And I would advocate that, again, you've taught me that even, and this is a very sacred cow for a lot of people, even patents, the way that the government controls the patent authority is a detriment to innovation.
Absolutely. And there's many people in these industries that are, I would say, rely heavily on patents. Pharmaceuticals happens to come to mind at the moment, but there's others, to be sure.
Yep.
I know even Boeing, I see these things all the time. Boeing patents this idea. They apply for patents for all this crazy stuff just in case it may make sense for them to do in 30 years, right. 50 years. I don't know what the duration of.
We've talked about patent trolls and all kinds of things.
Yeah. Crazy stuff. But what is that? That's government-granted protection on an idea. So a competitor may have come up with this at the same time, may come up with that same idea on his own, but say 5 years later, but they actually can't do it. But they may not have been aware that patent existed until they came up with the idea 5 years later and said, hey, we got to patent this. They go through the process and go, hey, you can't patent it. It's already been patented. Crap. That's where two people develop it completely independently, but one is barred from using it. Mm-hmm. Right? It seems crazy. It was my idea. I came up with the idea. You could argue I should have come up with it 5 years earlier or more, but I didn't. But I can't do it because I'm barred from the government. So it deters that competition. It slows down innovation. In other words, such a system will use resources less efficiently. And if that's the case, our standard of living is lower than it otherwise would be. Right? And again, I think it takes a little more thinking, a couple more layers. And that's, unfortunately, I think a lot of people don't do that for probably a number of reasons, right? They don't have interest. They're too lazy to do it. There's maybe other things. But I think it's really important. I think every single person should know this stuff. It's not that, school's a whole nother topic, but this should be taught in school. I think every person should be taught this, whether it be by a parent, a friend, a neighbor, a colleague, whatever. You should know this. These are things basic to life, more basic than the things that you do in your job. And I think they're widely misunderstood. And I think that's in part why our system is not performing as efficiently as I believe it should. And we would all be enjoying a higher standard of living had we understood these things and we supported them properly. Very interesting, though, the competition thing. Again, the price tells people, if I can't compete with you on price, well, then I might look at innovation. Hey, I might have looked at that first, but just assuming, Brad's selling screwdrivers, I'm selling screwdrivers, and doggone it, he apparently is selling those suckers cheaper than I think I can't make a profit if I do so. So what am I going to try to do? Maybe I'll try to make my screwdriver better. Maybe paint it a fancy color. And people just like it because of the color or something. The point is innovation. I'm pushed to innovate. And I'm likely that Brad's not going to be happy with his sales either, or I should say wouldn't be happy. He would like to enjoy greater sales, and he would still probably be looking at innovating in some ways as well. So we're constantly looking at innovation in a free market. If I enjoy government protection, right? In other words, if my only competitors happen to be international and there's tariffs on their products, I don't have the incentive to innovate. Why would I spend money to make my product better when I'm already basically holding my competitors at bay?
And then I've got a lock. I'm guaranteed.
Yes. Right? So again, what's the net effect of that? The citizenry is enjoying a lower level of a standard of living than they otherwise would. In other words, indirectly, and you can make the argument maybe ultimately becomes directly, we all pay for this stuff, right? And I think most people object to the, this is kind of a dumb word, to the outrageous regulations, the ones that are just stupid and they're clearly inefficient. But think about it, even the regulations that most people would support or do support, they cost a lot of money. They distort the price system, and by doing so, they necessarily reduce the amount of wealth that would otherwise be created. Now, let me go a little with that and say, well, wait a minute. Workplace rules clearly, like say the safety measures, those laws, ordinances, however they fall under whatever jurisdiction, they improve safety. The worker has less workers' claims, right? Less medical costs, all those things. So that saves companies money. So those regulations, people will argue, are good regulations because ultimately that does raise our standard of living then. I'm not arguing that a safer workplace is not a good thing. I would argue, of course it is. But I'm saying the way to really do that is let the competition in the job market do that. And let the laborer, the worker decide, hey, I might be able to get $20 an hour if I work for these guys, but they have no guards on any of their equipment. The other place is offering $15 an hour, but it's a really safe environment, right? Again, that's another way of letting the market determine what level of safety the marketplace is comfortable with, right? Instead of some bureaucracy, some council, some regulatory body, some group of people who don't even work there say, hey, you have to have this level of safety, right? Let the workers decide. Essentially, we're saying, hey, I'm not working there, or I am willing to work there as long as you compensate me at a higher rate, right? Or you provide better benefits, or whatever mechanisms are available for a worker and an employer to work out. So I would again argue over the long term, and this is very hard for people to see, we'd actually likely have a safer work environment if we didn't have those regulations. And I know people are going, no way, the regulations is why they did it. I'm not arguing why they haven't done some of that stuff, but I'm saying the marketplace, the workers would ultimately, and when I say force them to, I don't mean by a coercive exchange. I'm saying by just as the marketplace, a free marketplace would work for anything. Don't work there. Not too many factories, and I know obviously there's more automation than there ever was, but you still need people. I don't know of any operation that completely has never had a person involved, right? So you have to attract employees. And hey, with the economy at the moment, I think I hear companies complaining that they can't attract enough employees. Well, that would be one of the circumstances that a potential worker would contemplate. Safety measures, compensation, all these things, right? And so I think ultimately the marketplace would make things safer and do it in a much more efficient way than it's done now, rather than by edict. So again, it's about doing things more efficiently, which ultimately raises all of our standard of living. And again, this is all in concert with property rights rooted in self-ownership. That's where this whole argument comes from.
All right. I think that we should wrap this part of the show up and wrap the show up, Tom. What do you think?
I think we're ready. And if anybody is listening that feels like I didn't touch on something, or you may think, hey, he purposely avoided something because he doesn't have an answer to it, put it on Facebook. Ask us the question on Facebook. You're welcome to do that anytime, and we would welcome the conversation.
Thank you very much for all your good insight. Thanks for all that you've taught me. I'm gonna wrap us up with a quote that says, "The right to agree with others is not a problem in any society. It's the right to disagree that is crucial."
Yeah.
And that's by Ayn Rand.
Yep.
So thanks everybody for joining us. Please tell your friends about our show. Even tell your enemies. We'd welcome anybody to listen. We hope that we've made you think. And I in particular, I really hope that we made you think a little bit about free market and some of the contradictions that I think that you can see in the news and in the paper and in your own life every single day about that, whether things are a free market or not. And I know that I've learned a lot about that. I see it every day, and thanks to you, Tom, for that. Our next show is next Tuesday, July 21st, 7 p.m. Central Time. We hope that you will join us. Thanks for listening. We hope that we've provoked you to think. And again, let us know your comments on Facebook. Follow us there. And Only Peasant Radio, you've been listening to the Only Peasant Radio Show. Why don't you say goodnight, Tom?
Good night, everybody. I'm leaving you with Goodbye Weekend from Mac DeMarco. Here we go. Mellow.